So the purpose of this video is to show you how or why it is difficult for us Black people to protect our wealth, and why is it difficult for us to transfer our wealth to the next generations. I'm pretty sure that some people don't think of that, and it is clearly based on the response from that video. It clearly shows that we have never been introduced to this information. We don't think the way that we are ought to think when it comes to wealth preservation and wealth transfer, because that is where I feel we have been captured as Africans. And this goes like throughout the entire African diaspora, where you can count the number of successful wealth transfer cases. We can literally count within one hand the amount of people whose wealth has been transferred from their grandparents to their fathers and to them. There is very few Black people. There are very few successful cases of that nature where we can see that. Then made the decision to understand what is it that prevents Africans from successfully transferring wealth to their next generations. And one thing that is abundantly clear is that the difference of thinking between the wealthy white people and the wealthy Black people. Wealthy white people die poor on paper, and rich Black people die very rich on paper. And the difference here is that, one, they focus on control and access of properties and everything that they own, whereas the others focus on ownership of the properties, and on top of that, the control of those properties. The difference of these two is what is stopping us as a people from successfully transferring the wealth to the next generations. What do I mean? One, when you buy a property in your name, remember, I think it was in high school when you used to study, is it EMS, where we learned about the types of businesses, where one, we learned that if you're a sole proprietor, there are higher risks versus to opening a closed corporation because of the protections that exist between the two. When you get sued, your assets can be attached and you can lose everything. Now, what happens when you die if your properties are in your name? The properties become part of the frozen estate. As you all have known, that when you die, a person's assets and the bank accounts become frozen. So one of that is the access to the person's estate. Your spouse and children do not have access to your estate up until everything is wound up. So if you're a person who has properties that are collecting rental income, that income is no longer available to your dependents and your spouse to use as a means to continue supporting them. So it means that for the period of between 8 months to 10 years, that rental income in that property is unavailable because it is part of the assets of the deceased estate. It means therefore that rates that are normally that you have to pay, electricity, the maintenance of the general property, the people who are living in those properties are unable to continue paying them, or especially if you were the main breadwinner. This is why we are seeing Mandela's property on the news being in such a bad state, because it is up to the executor to release funds and payments that are responsible to upkeep the property. So you find that many other times the executors don't pay the rates, and body corporates, if you stay in these estates, will start demanding their fees, and body corporates can repossess that property. So dying is a very costly exercise if you die rich on paper. The executor's fees, after they've collected everything, so let's say with everything that you own, your savings, your investments, and your properties, the value of everything that you own is 10 million. The executor fees can go between 3 to 5 to 4% of the entire estate. So you are looking at 400,000 that is already being removed from your children's inheritances. There are other costs, therefore, that are going to be incurred in terms of the estate duty, which is between 20%. So you're looking at 20% of 10 million. Yeah. So you're looking at 2 million that is deducted from the estate. So you're already sitting at something between 7.6 million, if I'm doing the maths correctly. Then you're looking at the capital gains tax that is going to apply on the properties that you have. So what is a capital gains tax? So a capital gains tax is a tax that is calculated by SARS on terms of the gain that you have from a sale of a property. Whenever you transfer your properties to your children's names as an inheritance, SARS views that as a sale of the property and use capital gains tax on the value, on the market value, the current market value of a property. So even if you bought the property at 400,000, if the property is currently worth 5 million, SARS will charge the children the capital gain of 5 million. 20% of that will also be demanded by SARS. A lot of this process takes long because the accountants need to collect all the monies that are due to SARS in order for the estate, the executor, to finalize the process and hand over whatever money is left over. Now, what is your desired intention of the property in the state? So, do you want your kids to inherit this house as a place for them, as a home, in their personal names? Or do you want them to use it and then sell it and then continue their life? Let's say you die and your children are still very young. So, how much of that money that is left for them can sustain them up until they can be on their feet? What is your intention, or what is your desire for your children in terms of what is it that you'd like to provide for your children? Do you want them to be independent, to have enough money so that they can start their lives and use the wealth that you have given them as a head start in life? So all of that needs to be taken into consideration in looking at the best vehicle that will transfer your wealth. If, let's say, you are staying in an estate and the total cost of living in that estate, including food, electricity, rates, levies, is 10,000 rands a month, how many years will it take for your children to live there up until the money runs out in terms of living in this estate? And What will happen when your children get married and then they divorce? So let's say you're living this one house to your 2 children, and one gets married and gets divorced, and they both have 50% ownership of the property. Now, when one gets married and does not have a prenup, and then they get divorced, that means that their spouse is entitled to 50% of the 50% share that they have in the property. And therefore, it will mean that that property will have to be sold so that they can divide their assets in that divorce proceeding. So therefore, the purpose or what you were intending for the house is no longer achieved. So that is why you have to look at different vehicles that can protect your wealth. People prefer to use trust in order to, and a trust is like, think of it as a safety vault or a safe where you put your properties and you put your assets and you lock them up, because you have literally removed every responsibility and you have put it under this entity that is separate from yourself, which is one of the best options. Now, a trust also is dependent on your desired outcomes. What is it that you desire? So this cannot be one fits all. It has to be tailored to your need. What is it that you need? Because this type of vehicle can be expensive and can be costly to maintain if you do not understand exactly what you are trying to achieve. So a trust does protect your assets upon your death, in the sense that when you die, there are no costs, there are no estate duty costs, fees, there's no transfer cost, everything is done immediately. So when you buy a property under a trust, then it means that you are able to, the kids and the spouse can continue living or normally. One of the disadvantages of a trust, if the properties are in the name of the trust and those properties are rental generating properties, the rental income is subject to 41% of the income tax. So it is very expensive in terms of it's one of the highest tax bracket. So there are different types of trusts, and but based all of that will be, I cannot discuss all of those in just one video. I'll just maybe do a separate video discussing these trusts in detail. So another option is to buy via a company, a PTY Ltd. A PTY Ltd can protect the assets upon your death because it is also a separate legal entity. So when you die, nothing changes. If your properties are owned by a PTY and the income generated is then calculated after every deductions that are there and then taxed at 28%. I think the last time I checked. So taxed at 28%, which is far less cheaper from a property that is owned by a trust. So that is owned by a trust, but it is up to what you desire that will then determine what the best vehicle to protect your wealth and to transfer it to the next generation. I am available for consultation. My contact details are as follows. Contact me, we'll discuss this and then advise the best solution for you.